My name is Madison Hart. I'm a medical doctor, freshly graduated from UCLA after 8 years of studying, working ER shifts, and surviving the most grueling exams in the field. I reserved 2 VIP seats in the front row of the graduation ceremony seats for my parents. But they didn't show up. They flew to Europe with my younger sister, Olivia, to support her artistic journey. When I called, my mother said just one thing. "We didn't think you'd actually graduate." 1. It wasn't that they were busy, they just didn't believe in me. I stood there alone, surrounded by the applause of strangers, not a single family member by my side. But a few weeks later, when my face appeared on a billboard in Times Square, when people began calling me the rising pride of American medicine, they started calling. They said they missed me. Said they were proud. But maybe it was too late. This isn't just a story about a graduation that got abandoned. It's about favoritism, about quietly being pushed aside, and about a girl who stepped out of the shadow to create her own light. Have you ever felt like you were treated unfairly by your own family even after giving everything you had to prove yourself? If so, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, so I know I'm not the only one. 8 years ago, I stood in front of the bulletin board outside the school counselor's office, holding the acceptance letter from my dream university, the University of Washington pre-med program, majoring in biology. I remember the feeling when I opened that email, my hands shaking, my heart pounding like a drum. When the word "congratulations" appeared, I had to cover my mouth to keep from crying. I was the first in my family to be accepted into a pre-med program, which meant I had a real chance of becoming a doctor if I was persistent enough, strong enough, and stubborn enough to make it through everything ahead. I didn't think much about celebrating. I just wanted to bring that joy home, like a gift. Like a quiet statement that I, too, was worthy of pride. That I, too, deserved to be seen the way Olivia always was. That evening, while the whole family was having dinner, I placed the letter on the table between the salad and the pasta dishes. "I got in," I said, trying to hide the excitement in my voice. My mother glanced at the paper but didn't touch it. My father nodded, like I had just told him I'd picked up a part-time job at the grocery store. "Medical school's expensive," he said, continuing to cut his steak. "Over a decade of school, tuition going up every year. You should consider something more practical. Something with quicker money and less debt." My mom didn't look up. She just sighed. "Olivia actually has talent. You should be more realistic. Not everyone's cut out to be a doctor." I looked over at Olivia. She was excitedly talking about her dance rehearsal and her upcoming performance at the local theater. She was only 14 at the time, but had been taking ballet since she was 5, had a private vocal coach, and our parents even paid for a social media branding consultant to help her build her personal brand. Olivia was always encouraged to dream big, to push herself, to pursue what she loved no matter the cost in time, money, or effort. As for me, I just wanted to become a doctor. Not to be famous, not for praise. Simply because I loved science, loved healing, loved how knowledge could turn into action. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in my room, staring at the old laptop I'd been using since 9th grade. I started looking for scholarships. I opened 10 browser tabs, researching every program, every requirement. I knew my parents wouldn't pay for me the way they did for Olivia. I would have to do this on my own. The next morning, I walked to the cafe down the street and applied for a job. They hired me part-time for afternoons and weekends. For the first time in my life, I stepped out of the house with a strange feeling, not pride, but a quiet pressure, like something inside me was waiting to explode. I wasn't congratulated, I wasn't encouraged, but I also wasn't forbidden. And for me, that was enough. I didn't tell anyone how that felt. I just quietly submitted applications, worked, and saved every dollar I could for the fall semester. I worked all through July and August, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. There was a night I got home just before midnight, my back soaked in sweat and my feet aching, only to hear my mom laughing in the living room with Olivia. "My princess is getting her dress fitted tomorrow," Don't forget the silver heels we bought at Bloomingdale's. I walked past them. They didn't even notice I was home. I went into my room, opened my laptop, and kept reading first-year biology material. I didn't know if I was jealous or just sad. But I started to realize something. In this house, not everyone was seen. Some kids, no matter how hard they tried, were still treated as secondary. And I had learned how to stay silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew that my voice wasn't one anyone wanted to hear. The night before move-in day, I packed my suitcase, just a few sets of clothes, some textbooks, and an old stuffed bear from elementary school. My mother stood at the doorway, arms crossed. I called Aunt Joanne. If you can't keep up, you can move in with her and transfer to community college. Don't push yourself too hard, okay? I nodded, saying nothing. I knew they still believed I would fail. But instead of letting that break me, I let it fuel me. Like a quiet, steady fire burning beneath the surface. The next morning, Olivia was driven to Los Angeles by my parents for an audition. I took an Uber alone to the bus station to head to college. When the bus pulled away, I didn't look back. I just looked ahead and whispered to myself, "Go. Even if no one calls your name, walk like you belong." And I did. Alone. But I never forgot that day, the day I chose medicine. The day I chose myself. 4 years of pre-med at the University of Washington felt like living in a strange limbo between light and shadow. By day, I walked into lecture halls filled with dreams of medicine and molecular biology. By night, I worked shifts at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, pulling espresso shots and wiping tables as if that, too, was part of my medical training. I didn't expect luxury. I didn't need a private apartment or restaurant meals. I just needed a place to sleep, a few books, and a little quiet to study. But even then, everything was always lacking. Time. Money. The presence of someone saying, "You're doing great." In my first month of freshman year, I worked 20 hours a week to pay for textbooks and supplies. By the end of the semester, I increased to 30 hours because my mom texted saying Olivia needed a new laptop to edit videos for her new YouTube channel. They asked to borrow $600. I didn't ask why. I didn't say no. I just transferred the money and turned back to my desk in the dorm, where the desk lamp was the only light that never went out. I went through each exam like someone learning to survive in the middle of a storm. Chemistry, biology, physics, statistics, each subject felt like a mountain I had to climb in silence. When my friends gathered on weekends, I turned them down, saying I had to work. When I received my first academic award, I sent an email home with a photo of the certificate, an instinctive reaction, like when I used to bring home a perfect math test as a child. But the email went unanswered. "No, we're proud of you. No, you did great." Just silence. As if what I achieved wasn't even worth mentioning. I don't know if Olivia ever knew how I was doing in school. But I knew everything about her. Every day, I saw her on social media, dancing in short videos, filmed, edited, and promoted by our parents. Her channel grew so quickly that my mom once called me just to ask, "Do you know how to make thumbnails? We want something more eye-catching for your sister." I gave a dry laugh and replied, "I'm studying anatomy today, Mom." She cut in, "Okay, never mind, I'll ask someone else." After she hung up, I stared at the open book in front of me, the page detailing the structure of the human heart, and wondered if mine still worked the way the book described. Or if it had been hollow for so long and I hadn't noticed. The next 3 years passed like a loop. Study, work, send money, study again. I took the MCAT on a stormy winter day. I walked back to my dorm from the testing center, soaked and freezing, but relieved. I had done it. I knew I did well. That night, I baked myself a small cake to celebrate. I sent a message home. Just finished the MCAT. Hoping I scored high enough to apply for med school. My mom replied 7 hours later with one sentence, "Don't be disappointed if you don't get in." Not everyone has Olivia's kind of ability. I stared at the message. Not angry, just cold. The kind of cold that makes you sit still for hours before you realize your tears have already started falling. In my final year, I got the acceptance letter from UCLA's David Geffen School of Medicine, one of the top medical schools in the country. I remember the moment clearly. I was standing in the library, my legs giving out beneath me. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just sat down, opened my phone, and took a screenshot of the email. Sent it to the family group chat. No one replied. No one called. Not a single word of congratulations. Not even an emoji. That Christmas break, I came home because I heard Olivia had a big performance and I wanted to watch her sing. I also thought, maybe just maybe my parents would ask me about getting into med school. But the entire dinner was about plane tickets to Florida, Olivia's stage outfits, and the new followers she gained on YouTube. I sat there, eating slowly, listening to every word like I was watching a movie about someone else's family. When I quietly mentioned I got into UCLA, my mom just shrugged. Oh, that's good. But don't get your hopes up, not everyone finishes that program. Olivia has real talent. You should stay realistic. That night, I lay in my old room. Everything looked the same: the creaky wooden bed, the faded floral blanket, the owl-shaped nightlight. I stared at the ceiling, feeling empty. Not because I wasn't acknowledged, but because I had started to believe I didn't deserve to be. Maybe I was only trying so hard because I was afraid that if I stopped, no one would even remember I once existed in this house. I wasn't jealous of Olivia. I didn't want her spotlight. I just wished someone had seen me. Not a passing glance. Not a casual nod. But a real look. One that said I mattered. That I, too, was chosen. But that moment never came. So I kept walking. Back to Seattle, packing my things, getting ready for the medical program in California. No celebration, no goodbye hug. Just a wave through the Greyhound bus window, under the bleak January sky. And just like that, I entered the next chapter. Alone. But this time, I wasn't hoping anyone would follow. Because I had learned, if I wanted to live a life that was fully mine, I would have to walk it myself. In silence, in the dark, but steady. Stepping into UCLA's David Geffen School of Medicine felt like walking through the gates of heaven, a world I had only dared to dream of during my 4 years of pre-med. Gleaming hallways, portraits of renowned doctors lining the walls, cutting-edge lecture halls filled with hundreds of students immersed in the dream of saving lives. But within weeks, I realized this wasn't heaven, it was a battlefield. In the very first year, the intense class schedule forced me to quit my part-time job. I lived off student loans, scraping by with canned soup and instant noodles. My routine was as precise as a clock. Up at 6 a.m., class at 8, afternoons in simulation labs, evenings buried in textbooks until midnight. Many nights I passed out at my desk, neck aching from sleeping upright, too afraid to lie down before finishing my work. By third year, once clinical rotations began, it was like I vanished from the world outside the hospital. Mornings started with patient rounds. Midday, I was in the OR. Evenings, I charted notes. Past midnight, I dragged myself back to the dorm in a wrinkled white coat, the scent of antiseptic still lingering in my hair. I worked 30-hour overnight shifts, witnessed life and death, held panicked patients in my arms, trying to calm them while my own body trembled from exhaustion. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I had no one to tell. My 24th birthday passed like any other shift. No cake, no greetings. I still texted my mom. "It's my birthday today." Hours later, she replied, "Oh really? Sorry, I forgot. Olivia has a live ballet performance tonight. We're all at the theater." I read the message and placed the phone face down on the desk, silently turning back to my cardiology notes. That was the day I stopped expecting anything. When I passed the USMLE Step 1 exam, one of the biggest milestones for medical students, I broke down crying. Not out of joy, but relief. I had spent 3 straight months studying like someone buried in a cave, sleeping beside books, cut off from everything else. I texted the family group chat a photo of my score report, hoping maybe this time would be different. But my mom only replied, "Good. But Olivia has an important performance next week, and I'm very busy, please don't bother me." That, "don't bother me," pierced my chest like a quiet knife, not enough to bleed, but enough to ache every single day. I don't blame my sister. Olivia had always been sweet, bright, the beloved child given opportunities, lifted up by everything our parents had to offer. But sometimes, when I saw photos of her beaming beside our family on vacations in Florida or Hawaii, while I sat alone in my tiny Westwood apartment, surrounded by lecture notes and painkillers for my migraines, I couldn't help but wonder, am I really their daughter? There was a time I collapsed from exhaustion after a 28-hour shift. I fainted in the bathroom, my head hitting the porcelain sink. When I woke up, I was in the ER, IV in my arm, heart racing out of rhythm. I texted my mom, thinking maybe she'd be worried. But instead of asking how I was, she replied, "I'm in Orlando with Olivia. Don't stress me out with this nonsense, Madison." I turned off my phone, faced the hospital wall, and couldn't even cry. Some kinds of pain no longer have a shape. It just becomes this empty space inside you, so constant, so familiar that you forget you ever needed someone to care. I began shrinking into myself more and more. I stopped sending updates home. No more sharing achievements, no more messages. I smiled at patients, comforted them, held those who had just lost someone they loved, but every night, when I returned to my tiny apartment, silence was the only companion waiting for me. There was a time I helped save a young girl with bacterial meningitis, a case so complex even the attending physician called it advanced. They praised me for staying calm, reacting quickly, handling everything like a professional. Someone asked, "Your family must be so proud of you, right?" I just smiled. I couldn't say the truth that no one knew. And maybe no one wanted to. I started keeping a journal, just to hold myself together. On one wrinkled page, I once wrote, "I save lives every day. But no one has ever saved me from the feeling of being abandoned." I think the thing that hurt the most wasn't the absence, it was how present it always was. The favoritism, the dismissal, the quiet rejection wrapped inside ordinary words. "Don't bother us. Not everyone is talented like Olivia. I'm busy. All they're made to." Those words stacked, over and over, until they became a wall. I couldn't climb a wall that separated me from my own family, from the feeling of truly belonging. But still, I didn't stop. I showed up to class. I studied. I worked. I saved lives. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was simply surviving the only way I knew how. Keep moving forward, even when no one is waiting for you at the end. I no longer hoped, no longer expected. But I held on to one thing: belief in myself. That if I had come this far, then I would keep going. Even if no one saw it. Even if no one said my name. I would place the final step myself with these hands, these feet, this heart. A heart that had once been so lonely it cracked. But still beats, still loves, and still hasn't stopped. I began preparing for my graduation almost 3 months before the ceremony. It felt like a small ritual, like stitching together the parts of me that had been torn apart over the years. I spent an entire evening picking out a soft cream dress, not too fancy, but something that made me feel worthy of myself. I reserved 2 VIP seats in the front row for my parents' seats with name cards, floral accents on the arms, and a personalized guide I designed myself. I sent the invitations from my personal email, attaching a seating chart, campus map, full itinerary, and even the booking confirmation for a luxury hotel room near campus. I didn't budget. I didn't hesitate, because I thought, maybe this time they'd come. I told myself that 100 times as I folded the invitation and set it on my desk, waiting for any kind of response. I didn't ask for flowers. I didn't need tears or a proud embrace. I just wanted them to be there. To witness. Even just once. Even just for a few hours. But a week passed. Then 10 days. No reply. I called. The first time busy. The second my mom declined. The third she picked up. Her voice was familiar. Flat. No rise, no fall. Like a customer service rep answering a wrong number. Madison? She said, like she wasn't sure I had the right line. I just wanted to confirm, did you get the invitation? For the graduation. I've already reserved the hotel. There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. Then she exhaled. Oh, that. Actually, your dad and I are getting ready to leave for Europe with Olivia. She just received an arts grant. She'll be performing in Paris. It's an opportunity we couldn't pass up. I gripped the phone tighter. My graduation is an important milestone too, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Madison, we didn't think you'd actually graduate, my mother said, her tone as casual as if she were talking about the weather. We already booked the flights. Don't make a big deal out of this. I didn't reply right away. A long silence settled in, heavy and suffocating. Flashes of overnight shifts, migraines, blood on my white coat, moments spent walking between life and death, all of it raced through my mind. Only to hear now, from my own family, that they never believed I'd make it. Not that they were too busy. They just never believed in me. Never had. I took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the photo taped to my desk, a picture of me hugging an elderly patient after a successful surgery. A picture they'd never seen. I slowly brought the phone to my lips. Then don't bother coming to any future ceremonies. And I hung up. No goodbye. No apology. No hesitation. I just sat there, hand resting on my chest, over the heart that kept beating even if, at times, it had nearly stopped. I realized then. It wasn't that I expected too much. It was that I had hoped for too long. Hoped that one day, they would see me. Say my name. Be proud of me the way they always were with Olivia. But that hope had become something else now. A resolve that no longer needed witnesses. That night, I wrote my own thank you speech for graduation. I wouldn't mention family. I would speak about my first patients. About the professors who refused to let me give up. About the nights I studied under dim light, and the times I stood in front of a mirror whispering to myself, "You will make it, even if no one believes in you." The ceremony would go on as planned. The 2 VIP seats would still be there, with name cards that read, "Reserved for parents of Madison Hart." But I wouldn't look at them for long. I would walk across that stage like someone who had learned medicine's final lesson. Some wounds don't need stitching. You just learn to live with them. And I would live. As a doctor. As a human being. As myself. Unchosen, but victorious. Just 1 week after graduation, while I was folding my white coat into a suitcase, getting ready to leave the dorm and begin my first residency at a major hospital in San Diego, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "National Health Visibility Campaign, Urgent." At first, I thought it was spam. But when I opened it and read closely, I froze. It explained that this was a nationwide media campaign funded by the U.S. Department of Health to honor outstanding young doctors in the post-pandemic era, and they had selected me, Dr. Madison Hart, as one of 4 exemplary faces nationwide. I read that sentence over and over, not daring to believe it. They referenced a complex case I had handled back in February at UCLA, a traumatic brain injury where I had noticed subtle signs of seizure in a patient, even before test results were conclusive. Because of my calm judgment and decisive action, I recommended an early MRI sooner than the treatment protocol suggested, and that decision saved the patient's life in a matter of minutes. I had thought that moment would stay within hospital walls. I never imagined it would be recognized across the country. A week later, I was at a studio in New York, where a professional crew had everything prepared. They applied light makeup, placed me against a white backdrop, and asked me why I chose medicine. I talked about the first time I placed a stethoscope on a little girl with asthma, how hearing someone else's heartbeat made me tear up for the first time. I didn't mention my parents. I didn't mention Olivia. But I talked about the invisible ones. About the feeling of being forgotten. About the kids no one expected anything from, so they had no choice but to become extraordinary. They took hundreds of photos. I stood in a white coat, my name embroidered neatly, Dr. Madison Hart. The lights didn't make me glow, they just made me real. A week later, one of those photos was chosen as an official face of the campaign, appearing on billboards across the country: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta. But I didn't know exactly when the campaign would launch. I was already back at the hospital, starting my first day as a new resident, busy, humble, and exhausted. Until one Monday morning, while I was putting on gloves in a minor procedure room, my phone started buzzing nonstop in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. Olivia. I ignored it. Then came a text from her. Is that really you? Attached was a photo of a giant billboard in Times Square. Amidst the flood of lights, my face appeared clearly, with bold text below. Meet the next generation of American healers. Dr. Madison Hart, UCLA. I froze in that moment. Not out of shock, but because, for the first time in my life, a picture of me existed in a place where no one could look away. I didn't have to send a message. I didn't have to knock on any doors. They would see me, whether they wanted to or not. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone began ringing nonstop. Mom. Dad. Mom again. Aunt Joanne. My cousin in Minnesota. I'd barely ever spoken to him. I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed to explain. For all these years, I had survived without their recognition. I became a doctor not to prove anything to them, but to heal myself. A message from my mother came after the 6th missed call. Sweetheart, I didn't know. I didn't know how far you'd come. We were wrong. I'm sorry. Will you call me back? Then one from my father. Madison, I'm proud of you. Truly proud. I'm sorry I didn't come to the graduation. You are the light of this family. Leh. I set the phone on the table, watched it buzz, go silent, then buzz again. I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. I just felt calm. As if, finally, I didn't need an apology to keep living my life. That evening, I finished my shift at 7 p.m., walked out of the hospital, and looked up at the deep blue sky turning shades of pink and purple with the setting sun. I knew somewhere out there, they were probably panicking, trying to find me, wanting to say the things they should have said long ago. But I also knew, if I turned back now, the part of me who once stood before 2 empty chairs on graduation day would quietly disappear all over again. I kept walking one step at a time, steady, calm, because I had learned this. It's not the spotlight that defines your worth. It's how you walk through the darkness when no one is watching. And if anyone ever asked me what I did to be chosen as the face of a national campaign, I would simply smile and say, I just didn't stop, even when no one said my name. In the days after my image appeared on billboards across the country, I received a flood of messages not just from family, but from old friends, professors, even people I'd only briefly passed in lecture halls or during hospital rotations. But the most messages came from my parents. Every morning, I'd wake up to at least one text. We're so proud of you. We never imagined you were this talented. Your mother keeps staring at the photo in New York. We can't believe that's our daughter. The words were sweet, sometimes repetitive, sometimes long-winded, as if they were trying to patch a distance that had stretched across nearly a decade. But I didn't reply. Not out of anger. Just because it was too late for words to fill the years that had already passed in silence. One day, I opened Instagram and saw a story from Olivia. It was a picture of my billboard in Times Square, with a bold caption. My sister's a billboard doc. She added a heart emoji, set it to the song, Unstoppable. I stared at it for a long while. Olivia had never mentioned me online before. I knew it wasn't her fault. Olivia had simply grown up inside the love I never got. But even so, I didn't feel warmed like I thought I would. I just felt quiet, as if everything had finally come into the light. But that light no longer mattered to me. 2 months later, I was notified that I would be receiving the Young Physician Impact Award at a national medical conference in Boston. The ceremony would be held in a luxury hotel, attended by medical leaders and healthcare media. I knew it was a big occasion. I also knew the press would be there. So I wasn't surprised when, a few days before the event, my parents emailed asking for the details whether they could attend. I sent back the invitation. But this time, I didn't reserve them VIP seats. They arrived early that day, dressed properly. My mother in a deep blue dress, my father in a suit and tie, holding the printed program in his hand. They walked toward the front but were gently directed by staff to the last row where I had listed their names on the official guest list. I saw them from backstage. But I didn't come out to greet them. I didn't feel awkward. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt like I was honoring something inside myself. When my name was called, the entire room rose to their feet in applause. I stepped onto the stage, the lights blinding my view of the seats below. I took the microphone, breathed in, and began. I used to think I needed someone to believe in me before I could do anything great. I used to wait for a look of recognition, for a word of praise, or even just a simple message asking, "Are you okay?" But I've learned. You don't need to be chosen to become what you dream of. You just need to choose yourself. As long as you believe. You already have everything you need to begin. I paused for a moment, letting my gaze drift toward the last row where my parents sat. I couldn't see their faces clearly. I only saw my mother's head bowed, and my father sitting still, hands clasped tightly in his lap. I continued. I'm not standing here because someone opened the door for me. I'm standing here because I shattered that door using nothing but belief, tears, and resilience. And I hope, if there's anyone in this room who has ever felt invisible, you remember this. You don't have to be seen to become something extraordinary. The room erupted in applause. I smiled, bowed, and stepped off the stage with a weightless heart. After the ceremony, I walked out to the reception area. A group of young physicians and reporters gathered around, shaking my hand, asking for photos, wondering if I had plans to write a book or start a community initiative. I smiled, answered each question, still feeling as though I was floating through a dream I no longer had to pretend I belonged to. When the crowd began to thin, I turned and saw my mother standing a few feet away. She walked toward me, eyes a little red, and took my hand. "You, really? I have no words," she whispered. "I know it's too late, but I'm sorry, Madison. I'm proud of you." I looked at her. In her eyes was regret, the kind that comes from years that cannot be rewound, from hundreds of missed calls met with silence. I nodded. Gently. Politely. But I didn't hug her. I didn't break down. I was no longer the 18-year-old girl waiting for a mother's embrace. I was the woman who had learned to walk alone. I turned to my father. He nodded once, quietly. Maybe he didn't know what to say. I didn't need him to. Because that night, I understood something important. Forgiveness doesn't always require an apology. And growing up sometimes means learning to smile at those who once made you cry. Not because they deserve it, but because you no longer need anything from them. That evening, after the awards, I returned to my small apartment in San Diego, just around 300 square feet, with a worn chair, a desk, and a little window facing the freeway. I sat down, opened the drawer, and pulled out a cream-colored letter paper and my blue fountain pen. I wrote to the 18-year-old girl who once sat in a freezing dorm room, wearing a frayed hoodie and torn shoes, wondering, can I really become a doctor? I told her we didn't give up. That even when no one believed, no one cheered, no one said our name, we kept going. I wrote, you weren't chosen, but you chose yourself. And that was the best choice you could have made. I remembered the first day I walked into that lecture hall, sitting quietly in the last row, where no one knew my name and no one said hello. But it was in those days in silence, in endurance, that the person I am today was formed. I hung the photo of the Times Square billboard in my little apartment, not to boast, but as a reminder. I didn't disappear, even when I was treated as invisible. And if one day I grow tired again, I'll reopen that letter. To remember. When no one sees you, you must be the first to see yourself. If you're watching this story and someone has ever told you that you're not good enough to chase your dream, that you're being unrealistic, that someone else, maybe your sister, your brother, or someone more exceptional is the one more worthy of investment, love, and belief, then I want you to know this. You don't need approval to be deserving. I was once the girl left behind. Not in the dramatic way you see in movies, but in the quiet kind, so silent that even I didn't realize I was slowly becoming a shadow. Every step I took, every achievement I earned, was never enough to make anyone in my family pause and look at me with pride. But I eventually learned the most important truth. Your worth isn't defined by someone else's gaze. It lives in how you rise each time you're overlooked. Each time you're underestimated. Each time no one chooses you. And you choose yourself. I'm not telling this story to blame or expose anyone. Because I know that if I carry resentment in my heart, I'll never truly heal. I'm telling it for the ones like me. Those who were called not talented. Not like your sister. Not realistic. So you can see yourself in this journey. And realize that you have the right to rewrite the definitions of family, success, and self-worth. Family isn't just where you're born. It might be the patient whose life you saved. A colleague who hugs you after a grueling shift. A student who says you were the first teacher to believe in them. Family is the community you choose. The relationships you build with trust and kindness. And if your old family couldn't see you, you have every right to create a new one. Where you're chosen, where you don't have to shrink yourself, where you don't need to win to be loved. Maybe you've never had your name called in a crowd. Maybe no one's ever clapped when you stepped onto your own stage. But that doesn't mean you don't belong there. Every silent effort you've made, even if no one saw, it matters. Every time you put yourself to sleep after a long, exhausting day. Every time you refused to give up when everything said you should. Every time you believed you were just one step away from something true. Those are the moments that prove you're stronger than you ever realized. I didn't have a celebration after my graduation. No flowers. No emotional speeches from my parents. No polished video montage to share online. But I had a bench by the lake, a diploma in hand, a call that went unanswered, and a decision that I would not let their absence define the most important moment of my life. I would move forward. No proving. No pleasing. Only honesty with myself. And now, as I step out of this frame, no spotlight, no music, no scripted applause. I want to leave one thing with you, who's sitting on the other side of this screen. You are not invisible. You are not wrong for dreaming. You are not selfish for wanting to be seen. You deserve to be heard, to be chosen, to be loved. Not because you did everything right, but simply because you are you. Keep walking. Even when no one claps. Live a life you don't have to ask permission to be yourself in. Become what you dream of. Even if only one person believes you can. And if no one else believes in you, let that one person be you. This story doesn't end here. It's just beginning. In every quiet step you take, after this video fades to black. And if one day, you ever need someone to remind you that you're enough, you can come back here. Because this one is for every girl who was told she wasn't enough.